Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives. And wow, I'm looking forward to another interview with Adam Finnegan celebrating his new audiobook version of The Sleeper Agent. So without further ado, I will see you after the countdown. And Adam Finnegan, welcome back to McDuff Lives. How are you doing today?
Good to be here.
Glad to have you back and to celebrate your book launch. When did you actually launch the audiobook?
I think it was like July 4th. July 4th it was.
Oh, wow. Well, that's great. What great timing. I'm going to give you a round of applause for launching the audiobook. And a little wave of the flag here to celebrate your choice of days, July the 4th. It is kind of a patriotic thing to do to uncover all of this cloak and dagger biological warfare stuff so the American people can see what happened. And, I think of people that, would like to buy the book or read the book, but don't have the time for it. And, you've been observing from your position now at Trine Day how the book market goes and things that made sense. And so you decided to take up the challenge of creating the audiobook. Tell us how did you go about it?
Well, I used an AI software because I tried recording myself reading a few chapters and it's a lot of work. And so I was like, all right, well, there's all sorts of these AI softwares that can do this. And I know Chris Milligan had said something that he was saying something earlier in the year that audiobooks are selling like crazy, more than regular books, and that you can, and we were talking about how to do it. You said you could use an AI software nowadays and stuff. And so I use this program called 11 Labs. And the funny part is because I wanted John Loftus to read the introduction, and I didn't want to, have him. It's kind of a pain for anybody to just read a chapter. So I was able to take an interview that he did with me and Chris and take audio samples of that and feed it into the 11 Labs thing, and it makes a clone of his voice.
Wow.
And so I was able to do that, get it to read the introduction, and then I had one of mine, where it's similar to mine, but it doesn't sound exactly like my voice. But it reads like the 5 angles of biological warfare, dedication, acknowledgments and stuff. And then for the regular book, it's like this voice that was called Bill, and it's just a really nice sounding audiobook voice. And the fun part is having quotes by Eric Traub. I can get a voice that has a German accent reading in English, and then for the Russian bioweaponeers, I get something with a Russian accent, and then there's the Chumakov and stuff. I use an American voice or an English voice with a Russian accent. So it's just, I think it's really engaging. I think with that kind of variation, it would keep people kind of interested, it's just more engaging that way and not so monotonous.
Well, I certainly look forward to hearing it, and I know a lot of people also want to get a copy. So shall they just go to thesleeperagent.com and find it there?
Yeah, Yep, thesleeperagent.com. And you go to stores, and there's an audiobook version. And that's where it is. It's $20. It's less. It's like about the same as the book, and I think it's worth it. I think, and I may do something where you get like a audiobook and the ebook bundle, so that people can go through the citations if they want, because because obviously with an audiobook you're not saying the citations. It's just the text. So if they want to look into the sources that are used, they have to look at the book. So I'm thinking maybe I will sell that as a bundle and make it a good price for both. I don't know, something like that. But as of right now, it's available. It's like a zip folder, and they're MP3s. Now it has all individual chapters, and then it has an MP3 with the entire book. And it sounds good. There's like a little, some parts that are kind of glitchy, but it does the job, and it's finally done.
Are you using any of the services like Spotify, for example, to publicize it?
No, I have not. Actually, that's a good idea. Like I just got it up there, and I have to start doing all of this stuff to market it. And I may just go to Chris. I may end up putting it up on Amazon. Unfortunately, they take so much money from you. But
yeah, that's where my book is, of course.
It's where people get books,
That's right. That's right. You better to sell 1,000 on Amazon than 10 on some little tiny platform.
Yeah. So I'm probably going to do that. I probably will do that. And because a lot of people had been asking me about the ebook, and the thing about my book is a lot of people with Lyme disease want to know about my book, but a lot of people with Lyme disease have all sorts of brain fog and just have trouble reading. So an audiobook would be much more, it would be much easier for them to digest the material as an audiobook.
All right. So you get the whole book, plus you get the chapters, and all for $20. Sounds like a good deal. Yeah. And, let's say hi to Karma Doc. She's here saying hello and complimenting me all the way. Thank you, Karma. But let's see what she says. Lots of ticks this year and last year. She's up in Michigan, right, Karma? And how about you, Adam? You see any explosion in the tick population in Massachusetts?
The one year that I remember was really bad, and it was the year I got chronically ill, was 2016. And there were some people that died of Powassan virus. It's a tick encephalitis virus. I haven't really noticed. I mean, I've seen a few of them this year. I just haven't really. And my dog wears that collar that you put on, which it's probably not good for, but it's like at the same time, it's like
it's better than Lyme disease.
It's just I mean, the ticks are. They've always been a problem here.
Yeah.
And I remember.
We had to quit letting our dogs run free in the woods. We just couldn't do it anymore. And I would, there's a nice path through the woods here on the island, but we won't walk down that path no more because you're just afraid one's going to land in your hair or something, and you won't notice.
It's just so unfortunate. And it's like these activities, it's like all these activities, they just blame man-made climate change. Well, it's like, it's man-made. It's all of these biodefense activities gone awry.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have these horrible tick problems and mosquito problems. And it's so ridiculous that their solution is often releasing more of them under some guise that they're going to become less of them. Like one time, they released hundreds of ticks in Martha's Vineyard, infected with wasp eggs. It was like, the idea was because you know how the mosquito thing, where they're like, oh, we're going to release all these millions and millions of mosquitoes that are genetically modified and they'll breed themselves out.
Yeah.
It was something like that. It was like something like that. And it was like in the 90s. And they were releasing ticks in Martha's Vineyard. And it's just like,
They're still doing this crazy stuff too.
yeah.
And that's why my own work lately has been hashtag undo the coup.
Oh, yes, I've seen. And tell me a little bit more about that.
I'm talking about the JFK coup. Okay, the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Yes.
And the reason that I choose that one is that it was the assassination of the leader of the country, which is the typical thing that you do when you have a coup. So everybody should be thinking, oh, this is a coup, but for the fact that the people that organized it and allowed it to happen also became the people that investigated it in the Warren Commission. So,
yes.
And then all of these years have gone by, but there are many people out there, such as myself, that believe that, number one, that wasn't just a lone gunman that shot the president and we can go on with our lives. No, that every single so-called president since then has been appointed or allowed to win or put into position because it benefits the people that ran the coup. Why would you run a coup and then walk away from it and then let democracy come back in? No, we have got to understand what happened in 1963, how Lyndon Johnson got to be the president, and why we need to unpack it. And this has been my passion, and so. But your work on biological warfare falls right in there, because how in the hell could they get away with this if they didn't run the government?
Yeah. And I also do the Trinde roundtables, which covers the JFK assassination a lot, JFK's vision of world peace. But yeah, I mean, the story that I've got is like that our country's been slowly taken over a long time.
Yes.
And a lot. And so like some have pointed, to the communists, some have pointed British intelligence and stuff. And I would say both. But like an enemy of America that has just slowly been chipping away, has been infiltrating, and the biological sciences has been an area that has been left wide open. Now, remember, what I covered in the sleeper agent is that they didn't allocate any resources to assess the Soviet biological weapons threat in the Cold War, and they were letting Albert Sabin team up with Shumakov, to make the oral polio vaccine, and then MP Shumakov's son gets into vaccine safety and review at the FDA. So,
well, I want to stop you there, though, because that's one of the points that I think people have a hard time with. For some reason, the general idea is that science is sacred, and these scientists, they trade information back and forth, trusting each other not to abuse it, not to let some bad guys get a hold of it, and just to advance, human knowledge, the science, march forward, and yeah, they dealt with some deadly shit, but. This is MP Chumakov. Now he's on our side, right? He's, his son would never be, like Stalin wanted him to be. He's now a good guy, because these guys, come on, are scientists. This is what I think is one of the roadblocks to people understanding what happened in the 50s and the polio virus.
Yeah, I mean, he's done interviews. I've read a lot of them, and he kind of talks like he's against communism and everything. Well, you might be, but the networks that were involved in that, I mean, communism isn't really who they are. It's just one set of clothing that they wore during that time, so you could be against that. But I would say, that's a position that is very sensitive. Would you take the chance to put somebody like that in a position like that, knowing his past? Because the classified files, they're very well aware of those 1937 Siberian epidemics that he was involved in, which had to do with biological warfare. So if his son is over here now running the FDA, and think about how strict they were about defectors. Like, for example, Ken Alabek, like they were, he had to have an elaborate, plan to get out of there. But yet this guy can just walk over here and be part of our system, no problem. And he said that all of his important graduates from Moscow University also fill positions now in public health in the West. And it's like, now, if if things were going great and the job, the FDA was doing really great and they were keeping everybody safe, well, then we wouldn't really have a need to scrutinize any further, and we could say, yeah, sure, okay, I guess he wants to work for us now. But when you have serious problems at the FDA with safety and how they're just kind of greenlighting some of the most dangerous things we could put into ourselves, then you have to start asking yourself what's really going on here. And then you have to start scrutinizing. And, it does not make a lot of sense why, because he came over here when the Soviet Union was still in power, remember? So this was before the Soviet Union fell. He was allowed to come here through Sabin's help. And
you're talking about MP Chumakov, right?
Konstantin.
Oh, the son.
Yeah, the son at Vaccine Safety and Review. Yeah,
but the son comes over here in the 40s?
No, he came over here in I think it was like the late 80s.
Okay, I was confused there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no, I'm talking about Konstantin, like how we just let him come over here and then he starts leading Vaccine Safety and Review at the FDA.
Right.
Because you made the point that, well, he just wants to work for us now. He's flipped to us. Well, it's like you could say that, but when you start looking at the job they're doing, and, they know that spike protein is a potent mitogen, and that will bring cancer. Like that's established.
Let's define mitogen for folks.
Okay. Specifically, what I have
it's an agent that causes cells to divide, right?
Mitosis. Yeah, it's an agent that, and I have the exact definition here. Yeah, so mitogen is an agent that causes mitosis or cell division and growth factors, mutations, etc., and this can become very relevant in chronic diseases and cancers.
Yeah. Yep, indeed.
And so it doesn't make really any sense why they'd have people injecting this, on a large scale.
So you're back to talking about the spike protein, right?
Yeah. And it can be synthesized as an adjuvant called pam-316, and that's in a lot of vaccines, and also antigens that are comparable that pretty much do the same thing. And so, it doesn't make much sense, especially when they're trying to get all the children now to take COVID vaccines. Then they're giving them COVID vaccine with influenza vaccine, like at the same time. It's just, and the problem here is that spike protein is very immunosuppressive. And I said, before all this measles stuff started, I said, you're going to see measles outbreaks again because that vaccine is so suppressive. A lot of people, if you get it, right, then you're suppressed from that. And then they give a child an MMR and the person's really suppressed, well, then it reactivates and then starts new outbreaks. I mean, Konstantin Chumakov has written all about this. That's one of the things I don't understand. He's written all about this for the polio thing, because it's the same thing. When you give a polio vaccine to somebody who's immunosuppressed, especially the live one, it allows for an active, they call them revertants. They revert back to a dangerous form. And then also in the inactive polio vaccine, they were saying that, like I covered in the back of my book, about the Cutter incident and the testimony that was given, how they were saying that it's not a reliable thing and it doesn't always guarantee an activation, and you'll always have live virulent virus involved sometimes. And what did he say? He said, let me see. It was John Enders, one of, he said, for Salk, the worst moment came in early May as the Cutter incident was unfolding. At an emergency session at NIH, he faced the wrath of the formidable John Enders, who had just returned from Stockholm with a Nobel Prize. Their relationship had been distant but cordial. Following a rare visit to Pittsburgh in 1953, Enders had written, "Jonas, your laboratory is indeed magnificent, and the work going on worthy of the greatest praise." Now, Enders told him, "It is quack medicine to pretend that this is a killed vaccine when you know it has live virus in it. Every batch has live virus in it." And so then there was that testimony that Traub took part in, where they're saying, well, the Cutter incident wasn't really what they're saying it is that you don't really have a reliable method for inactivating the polio vaccine. It's like, it doesn't happen like a first order chemical reaction is what they said. And they thought that, I said, yeah, and more than this, these experts also testified to say that the vaccinated persons could shed considerable amounts of live virulent virus after polio vaccination with the inactive. And these experts thought that this to be the most probable explanation for higher cases of polio in the placebo than the vaccinated, because the vaccinated were shedding and infecting the unvaccinated placebo cases. They said that in this paper, okay? I know it sounds like something like that I might have made up, but no, this is what it says in that paper. It's in German. There were two papers. Eric Traub actually took part in it. There was a long list of people that took part in it, but he was on it. And so it really exposes the nature of these killed vaccines, is that it's not, it's not exactly so. And there's always chances that it's not. And it's also highly reversible. So if you killed, so the idea that it's killed is kind of like a misnomer.
Right.
Insel Reams had published about this process being highly reversible. So I found that to be a really interesting paper.
And how does that connect to?
Okay, so yeah, and so back to what we were saying is that Konstantin. Now he was saying we should give people oral polio vaccine during the COVID-19 situation.
Right.
He was saying we should give them oral polio vaccine to fight COVID-19. That's a really, really bad idea considering how immunosuppressive that spike protein is. I mean, that's the thing is that he's published about this, like, at length. Like, he's published about how this happens. Why anybody would suggest that, it's just, you start to wonder what their true motivations are.
Let me try to get myself straight on this. You're speaking about Konstantin Chumakov doing an analysis of the polio vaccine, the supposedly killed one, which he knows and he showed, or somebody showed, that it's really got live virus still in it. So,
well, Konstantin wasn't part of that. That was in the 1950s, that paper. and it was about the inactivated polio vaccine that Jonas Salk had made, because there was that incident called the Cutter incident where they said all these kids who got the vaccine got paralytic polio after, and
Yeah.
they said it's because it was inactivated improperly, but actually the testimony of Eric Chaub and all these people that took part in these two papers are saying, well, we don't see that we don't see that laboratory did anything but what they were told. And the problem is that there's no reliable formula for inactivating a virus, because it happens very unevenly, and it doesn't happen like a first order chemical reaction. So, fast forward to Konstantin Chumakov.
Okay.
He had been publishing paper after paper, or at least he's published several papers about how when somebody is immunosuppressed and you give them a live virus, it reverts to active form and it can be dangerous. But then, because the inactivated polio vaccine is also said to have live virus in it because of how it, the same could also happen with that. And you can also apply that to the influenza vaccine, where they use the inactivated influenza vaccine, and they give it at the same time as the COVID shot. And why would he do all this research and know these mechanisms, but then suggest that we give people the oral polio vaccine in the midst of this very immunosuppressive SARS coronavirus 2? It doesn't make sense. Like it just goes against what.
There's one thing I really got to understand. When you say that he's recommending the oral polio vaccine for COVID in 2020 or 21 or so, is that the same oral polio vaccine that Albert Sabin and Chumakov created and went into the sugar cubes that I took and something like 30 some million children took, and it's that oral polio vaccine, the one from the early 60s. Now they're saying, you should take that for COVID. See, I had to make sure that we were talking about the same vaccine. And the second point I want to clarify on is that you're saying that because it's a live vaccine, supposedly the attenuated version of polio, so it's not the worst polio virus you could get, but it's still a polio virus. That attenuated pilot has in it the spike protein. And this is what I think I want to make sure I understand, that it's the vaccine contains spike protein. Is that what you're saying?
Well, the oral polio vaccine, even though it's supposedly, like avirulent or weakened, when you give it to somebody who's immunosuppressed, that weakened version can then become dangerous again. It regains itself. And the polio virus has a comparable antigen. So it just doesn't make sense why, because obviously if the SARS coronavirus 2 is spreading everywhere, you're going to have a lot of immunosuppressed people, right? So why would you then start giving this live virus to everybody, right, to fight COVID-19, when he knows and has published at length about how when you give immunosuppressed people these live viruses, they reactivate and they become very dangerous. They can become very dangerous. So it doesn't really make sense. So you'd start to see like polio outbreaks, right? Because you're giving this to all these immunosuppressed people. Well, now it's regaining itself, and now it's going to start new outbreaks. Well, that's what I'm also saying about measles. The measles vaccine, like MMR, has 3 different viruses in it. And they're in that dry frozen form, the lyophilized, which Intel Reams has published about how it can initiate this delayed reactivation. So this virus reactivation thing is a really big concept in the sleeper agent. But Konstantin Chumakov saying that, it goes against, like, why would you suggest that? That's what I'm saying, is like, what is his, why would he go ahead and suggest that? So there was a New York Times op-ed features Gallo Chumakov oral polio vaccine for COVID-19 idea. And they were saying repurposing old vaccines for new outbreaks. They also suggested tuberculosis vaccine, which that also causes immune tolerance. So, and you think about it, the oral polio vaccine could be acting in a very similar way as LCM virus. When Eric Chaub had started, that epidemic. Because it can probably pass down generations. Like, who has done any research to suggest that, okay, you're giving somebody symptomless cases of polio? That's what the oral polio vaccine is. Well, what happens long term if you have this chronic infection with polio? What kind of, like, even without the SV40, like, what about the safety of this polio virus long term? Like, has anybody looked into that? Like, what if that's contributing? And I'm pretty sure they know. And I think that's why I think they went back to the Salk vaccine. And what really doesn't make sense is, like, I covered in the end of my book about how Sabin teamed up with Chumakov, right? But Russia and the health ministry there, they had no plans to initiate a new vaccine. They didn't have any plans to do that. So why was he going over there collaborating with him if they had no plans to initiate this? You know what I mean? They team up with us. They let Chumakov team up with Sabin, bring him over to Russia. He starts going back and forth between America and Russia, starts working on this new vaccine. But yet, when Konstantin Chumakov tells the story about his father being able to start the trials in Russia, he was told that there's no plans to start a new vaccine. We have the Salk vaccine, and it works just fine. And he talks about how, I can read this little portion if you want. He said, Sabin publicly gave credit to my father and the Soviet system whose organization made such large trials possible, Konstantin says. But I'm not sure my father ever told Sabin the true story of it. What actually happened, according to my father, went like this. My father couldn't get permission for a really big clinical trial. A lot of the people in the health ministry were opposed to it. He was told, basically, we have the Salk vaccine and it works fine. So there's no reason for you to test the live virus. And he goes, well, my father decided to go around them. In the Soviet Union, there was a higher authority, the Politburo, which consisted of a small group of Communist Party officials who could overrule everybody. At the time, Anastos Mikoyan was the Politburo member responsible for public health. Mikoyan was not a medical man. He was a political figure who went back to the revolution, but he and my father were well acquainted. Mikoyan may have appointed him to head the polio initiative in the first place. Refusing to accept the ministry's decision not to grant permission for the oral vaccine tests, Chumakov picked up one of the red telephones provided for the exclusive use of the most powerful people in the Kremlin. He was not among them and dialed Mikoyan's number. As Chumakov related the story to his son, he got right to the point and asked Mikoyan's approval to proceed with the live virus vaccine tests. Are you sure this is a good vaccine, Mikhail? Mikoyan asked. And that it's safe? Yes, the virologist replied. I'm absolutely sure. Then go ahead, Mikoyan said. That was it, says the younger Chumakov, whose account rings true with others familiar with the principles. The only permission he had was verbal over that Politburo hotline. Of course, the health minister was unhappy, but there was nothing he could do. So it doesn't make a lot of sense if he's teaming up with them, going over there, and they would have to approve Sabin going over there. They'd be very aware of it. He would have to get special permission to set foot in the Soviet Union. And he's working with Chumakov, but yet Konstantin says that the health ministry didn't even have any plans to initiate a new vaccine. They were like, so it's like, okay. And And if he was not among those people who used that phone, how the heck did he know the number to get a hold of Mikoyan? I mean, that's kind of like, you can read a lot from that, from what he said there. Like you can analyze a lot of elements here, and they don't make sense
unless there's some overarching purpose behind all this that's just not seen.
Well, that's what I'm saying, and that's what I said in the book, is that unless he was approved to do this for another purpose, like bio warfare type stuff, and like vaccine sabotage. Well, I mean, the technologies themselves aren't safe, but you could always make them more dangerous. You get contaminant viruses in there and all sorts of other stuff. So it doesn't really make sense why this was allowed to happen. And now remember, that was at a time when there were gaps and we hadn't allocated any resources to assess the biological warfare threat at that time. So it was wide open. Like our biodefense was wide open. They were sending people over here. Konstantin Shumakov, of course, much later on, gets a position at the FDA, NIH and FDA. And then when you start saying things like we should use oral polio vaccine to fight SARS coronavirus 2, it rings alarm bells. When you understand like the whole Eric Chaub science of immune tolerance and virus reactivation, the science of chronic disease, basically. And when he's publishing, so he's saying all this stuff in the papers, but then he's publicly saying we should do that. It's just, and it kind of like, so remember that post you sent me by that Substacker, Escape Key.
Right. Yeah. We talked about it in the last show, and the general idea is that back in, I can't remember when it was, but under the guise of an environmental connection, that we're all going to save the planet together, that the Soviet Union and the United States entered into an agreement, and they under the guise of that, they started putting human issues in, like sustainability, which is code word for overpopulation. And from
and they did like and they this is like the setup of globalism, kind of like it's related. So because I think people have a hard time when I say when you hear the word the Russians, right? Because of they think it's all just hysteria, because of 2016 and the election and everything, and Putin's really a good guy. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so there's this promotion of that. So when people come to this book, I think they have a hard time because they don't understand, because they're like, oh, it's the globalists. The Russians are just scapegoats. Well, I'm saying that it's kind of like the same thing. There is a group involved there that also helped to set up this globalism thing.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Let's take a couple of comments and questions from the chat room. How's that? Let's see. Here's Karma Doc. She says, and others said that. Remember, you're talking about the polio vaccine. Others said BCG vaccine would be helpful in COVID. I don't really know what it is.
It's the same idea. Okay, so the BCG vaccine is the tuberculosis vaccine, and I believe it uses Mycobacterium bovis, which is that's a live bacteria vaccine. They're saying it's an avirulent or weakened strain of an animal form of tuberculosis, which is said to also work against tuberculosis. That also has that nasty antigen in it that causes immune tolerance. So they were also saying this vaccine. They were saying, let's repurpose old vaccines for new outbreaks. And that was what they were saying.
And Brightmore Dinosaurs here. He says MMR vaccination rates have plummeted from 94 to 91% in the post-COVID era. cited as the reason for the current measles outbreak. You
they're
mentioned
always they're
Yeah.
always going to blame vaccine hesitancy, but a lot of this is coming from vaccinated people. They are given, like, if you're going to give everybody the COVID vaccine, you're going to have a lot of immunosuppressed people with this immune tolerance like syndrome. And when you start giving them live virus vaccines, you're going to see new outbreaks because it's going to revert to, a dangerous form and start outbreaks again. They've published on this ad nauseum, like they have shown this to be so. So it makes absolutely no sense. It's just crazy. But it's always going to be, because people. Yeah, and I remember my mother was telling me he had a conversation with somebody and said, tuberculosis is coming back because people don't want to get vaccinated. But we never had a tuberculosis vaccine that was given to all these people. So that argument doesn't stand at all. We actually stopped giving it because it was so bad. And that one's a really nasty one. That's like the HIV vaccine. HIV vaccines have also been really terrible. Well, so have the tuberculosis vaccine, and it's that antigen that causes immune tolerance. Also with malaria, this is known, and Lyme disease. There's that ability. It has that similar antigen. We'll call it Pam3Cis-like because they don't really have a name for it in nature, which is called its native form. They don't really have a name for it, but when they synthesize it as Pam3cysteine.
Don't trust them, says Colleen Bonnywell. Have comfortable opium dens, nursing homes, and fake Mirus Gabs. I don't know what that is, but I just wanted to speak to the opium dens hyphen nursing homes, and just the explosion of these hospice facilities is being financed at a very high rate. And what do? You take grandma to the nursing home, and she lives a very happy, relaxed life in which she just loses her motivation. The drugs eventually quell her pain, but also quell her spirit. This is what I see is the manufacturing of opium dens for profit out of the pain and suffering that are caused by the chronic diseases and the cancers and the mental health problems that you speak about so well in your book. So
yeah, and so the audiobooks, I think it's like 10 hours or something.
The audiobook is 10 hours.
Yeah, look, it's over 10 hours. Under 11 hours, but it's over 10 hours. But I hope that this resonates with people, and I think a lot of the people with chronic diseases will have a better time absorbing this with an audiobook rather than trying to read it through. Now, there's been plenty of people who have read it through, and some love it, some probably, some, like, for example, like some people have a hard time, like with that whole thing I was saying. Is I think probably it's because in the introduction or the foreword, when John Loftus is kind of like, he's looking at it as though he's just placing all the blame on them, and that's not necessarily my view. He wrote the introduction, but I've got a much, me and him don't agree on everything, and that's fine. But he did have some very valuable information in a biodefense source who I did meet, and was able to gain so much by having this. Now, when he told me that stuff back then, I was like, oh, that's hysteria. That's just this Russian hysteria stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually like what I'm saying is not just blaming them, and especially in the beginning, you could see all of the work of British intelligence, what they were doing to us early on. And I would say that the Soviet Union anyway is like a creation of British intelligence. Um,
And that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think the more people that study the situation, the more people are going to understand it. There's a lot of great books coming out by people like Guido Preparata.
I took a part in a conference he was at. I took part in a conference he was at. We were going over two world wars and Hitler.
Oh yeah, I got that book in the mail 2 days ago, and I'm into it about 35 pages. This is the hottest book right now, guys. If you want to get it, I mean, other than Adam's audiobook, I would say this book is being read all over the place. Between the two world wars and Hitler is the name of the book, and I forget the name of the authors. One of them, I think.
Yeah, his name is Jim McGregor and John O'Dowd.
Right. So
anyway, we've been doing these round tables about that book, and Guido was there.
Yeah. Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah.
Yeah.
I interviewed Guido about 6 months ago. Folks can find my interview of Guido Preparata, a very, very erudite, intelligent analyst that's been working on this stuff for decades. And then reviving the interest in Anthony Sutton's books. Anthony Sutton wrote all about Wall Street and the investments of Wall Street in the Soviet Union, and which fits right in with what you're saying. Is that Russia is devastated after the Russian Civil War. 15, 20 million people are dead. There's no villages. There's nothing left. Who's going to invest there? Well, it's the whole plan all along. Is to it's called Ordo ab chaos. Order out of chaos. And who comes in there but the big companies and build the factories that enable the Soviet Union to become a military power, so they can destroy Germany, and then they get tired of Soviet Union being a military power, so then they turn around in the 90s and destroy the Soviet Union. That's the kind of analysis that people have to do, is to step back and say, wait a minute, this is not, quote, the Ruskies against the Americans.
No.
This is high finance. This is at the imperial level, way above where nations and ethnic groups fight. This is about big money.
The whole Skull and Bones thing, like. Chris gave a nice presentation at that round table for Two World Wars and Hitler and he kind of showed that I had never heard the story. He was talking about his dad, how his dad was a spook, a spy, and the Vietnam War. They were running that lose scenario, and he said it was about these secret societies, the Skull and Bones, bringing all the drugs back over here, and like just something completely different than what we were told. I have that book coming, America's Secret Establishment.
That's Sutton, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, the story that I have is not opposed to this, to all the people who think of this globalism worldview. Right. Yeah. It's not opposed to that. It's actually part of it. Like, I just, I didn't go into that whole thing, but when you start reading Escape Keys, if you have ever read some of his stuff, he shows how the Soviet Union and us, we kind of like merged into this, cooperative agreements, and the UN is kind of like the center of it.
That's the history that is not told in the history books, and that's a huge part of my work, because my dad was involved in it, as you know from my books. So. That sense of it's them against us, it's the same thing with political parties.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. God, the goddamn Republicans, I hate them so much, I'm going to vote Democrat. Why? Well, what's good about the Democratic Party? Well, I can tell you one thing, that's not the Republican Party. That's all I need to know, and then flip it on the other side. So I'm voting Republican because the Democrats suck. Well, what do you know about the Republican Party? I'll tell you one thing: the Democrats suck. And so
Yeah,
that's kind of just that's how they play us. It's divide and conquer, and then they once they've destroyed everything, then they come in just like they did in Russia and rebuild something that suits them out of the
right.
ashes. Yeah. Anyway,
Absolutely.
yeah, this was this was my contribution to tying all of Adam's work into the big picture, and I think we spent some time today conquering one of the big problems with accepting the sleeper agent, and that is where you do put MP Chumakov and Konstantin Chumakov in the in the evil side of the debate. On the other hand, that does not mean that it was them acting on behalf of the Soviet Union, or in the present day acting on behalf of the Russian Federation or Vladimir Putin. What it means is that there's somebody behind the scenes pulling all the strings, and that's where we really need to be working. And that's of course Toto's job. Our faithful Toto here at McDuff Lives. When she hears something suspicious, man, she lets you know, and then she's going to pull that curtain back, just like in the movies. Well, Adam, you've done a great deal of pulling back the curtain on a lot of hidden skullduggery that's affecting our world today, and I thank you for it, and thanks for all the time and effort you put into writing the book and publishing the book, and now you've produced an audio version for those who prefer the audio version. And 10 hours? That's like if you have a half-hour commute, then you can conquer it in 10 days. So you could rate it
Yeah,
up.
I mean, you just like read a chapter. Yeah, you read a chapter at a time. I think that's what I say to people. It's like don't get overwhelmed with consuming the whole thing at once. Just take segments.
I agree.
But yeah, I'm happy with how it came out. I'm glad I did that.
Oh, by the way, have you talked to John Loftus lately? Just checking on how he's doing.
Yeah, I haven't. It's been he keeps in touch with me. Because I'm always trying to show him things about how dangerous this COVID vax is. He's like on the pro-vaccine side. That's one thing that me and him could never. And I showed him time and time again, and it's just, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't get through.
Let's get through a couple of more comments. Here's Key Jason. Health workers gets many. Oh man, health workers. I can't imagine how bad that would be to have, a job where you have to take a jab just to get a paycheck, and every time the dancing line nurses.
And you can't sue them if something happens to you.
Brightmore Don, RFK has canceled an upcoming meeting with the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force. Task Force members fear Bobby will clean house like he did with the ACIP, which provided guidance. Yeah, I mean, it's a mixed report card so far, right? I mean, I think he's done some good stuff, but he can't get past the MMR problem. So that's it's disappointing, but on the other hand, we'd be a lot worse off if the other team had won the presidency, I think.
And I mean, I don't know what's going to become of that. I just don't see them cleaning up that problem. I just kind of feel it's going to be like every other time where it was kind of like what just happened with the Epstein thing, right? Everybody was like, everybody's disappointed because it's like, what did Trump didn't release any of it, and now they're saying that the official story is correct.
Yeah, it's all politics and backstabbing behind the scenes. Business as usual.
Yeah, and she's right. She's right there. That's what I'm. It's like they wanted flu and I think they wanted flu and COVID to recombine and get a super virus, and that's what I would be really concerned about. But with giving them both of it at the same time.
Wait till they lyophilize virus into fentanyl. Oh, it's coming. Oh my God.
It's crazy. Like society has become so broken down, and people aren't having families anymore. What are all of these people going to do when they get old? Like, how is this going to work out? Because it's just, the more I look into the future, I'm just like, this is going to be a disaster.
It is. Well, I think
I'm hoping maybe there's be some kind of awakening.
Well, I don't know, man. A lot of people are working hard. I follow Kevin McKernan on my X feed, and he keeps turning up stuff we should all be worried about, but nobody seems to bring it up to the next level. Same thing as yourself. I think your work needs to be elevated into the highest part of our healthcare system for the people that can do something about it. But to get the awareness, well, guys, get a copy, get the audiobook, try to share it with people. And if you can find a doctor that'll talk to you about it, then please, bring those guys with MDs into this conversation. If you can possibly do it, they're the ones that people really want to listen to. And until somebody with an MD on their chest comes out and says, Adam Finnegan is right, there's going to be hesitation. So we're fighting an uphill battle, but we are fighting hard. And Adam, you're fighting the hardest of all of us for this cause. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, have a great afternoon, and we will see you tomorrow with our weekly wrap up with McDuff and Marcia at 11 a.m. Bye now.